As promised, we're right back. So our next session on the People stage is a panel. And we've got some familiar speakers and some new ones to the industry. So I would like to first welcome to the stage our fearless moderator. Venus, I think you would do the best job introducing this panel. I'm going to take myself off for a minute, but as you might be able to see from the slide, I'll be right back.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. And what a hard act to follow with Lisa's energy and passion, but also so much wisdom. So I'm Venus Pineyro. I'm the CEO and founder of Vector U. And what we do is we're focused on helping businesses discover the inherent power of the diversity and inclusion when you embed this in the DNA of a company. And we have Sarah and Cindy joining us. Today, what we're going to be talking about is diversity, equity, and inclusion in additive manufacturing. And over the next 45 minutes, we're going to get some practical advice on what you can do to support and promote diversity and inclusion in your organizations. So welcome, Cindy. I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves before we get started.
Hi, Venus. Hi, Sarah. And also hello for all the audience around the world. We here another year and we are making history again. It's such an inspiration event. And like Venus, you say, Lisa already set the stage. The energy and everything is so high and is so motivated. I'm Cindy Deekitwong. As a familiar face to most of you in the industry, I'm a global head for Henkel Incubator business under Additive Technology Unit. I'm leading or representing the brand you love and hopefully use every day, Loctite.
Thank you, Cindy.
And I am Sarah Goehrke. I'm clearly your friendly neighborhood people track leader for TIPE 2022. I'm also the Senior Director of Strategic Communications and Ecosystems at Nexa 3D, as well as on the board of directors and our head of DEI at Women in 3D Printing. I also have the great privilege of working with Cindy as a partner between Henkel and Nexa 3D and with Venus through our Women in 3D Printing DEI initiatives. So I'm so excited that we're able to share the stage today and to have Venus lead this incredible conversation.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Cindy. Well, like we know, we're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion today. But before we go into the conversation, I would like to just bring about one of the subjects that Lisa was talking about, where diversity is not just gender diversity. And I think we all know this. But I sat back down to think the different types and numbers of diversity that I could think of. And I counted about 27. Some of them we think about very often, right? Race, gender, age. Some of them we don't think about very often, such as cognitive abilities or military status or cultural background, parental status. So I wanted to just bring this to the forefront so that we do know that diversity is more than gender. So tech, I want to talk a little bit about tech and how we embrace diversity. It's so important for the tech industry to embrace the diversity because innovation is so important to keep tech relevant and competitive. And in order for all of us to display our talents, we need to be exactly who we are, and we need to have all these different sets of inputs into what we bring to our organizations. So I'd like to open up by asking both of you, why do you think diversity and inclusion is important in additive manufacturing? I'm going to start with Cindy.
Yeah, that's actually a very, very good question. Let's stepping back and look at our industry. 3D printing, additive manufacturing, it's not an old industry. We go back, 40 years old? It's still in the very early adoption stage. What does that mean? It's required a lot of collaboration, a lot of creative thinking, a lot of failure and get up and pivot. That's why for us, having that diversity inclusion element to drive further adoption of the technology, for me, is such a crucial part of it. We cannot do things by ourselves, right? For us in Henkel, we work very close with Nexa because we know having a partnership, collaboration, an element of diversity is a catalyst to drive this forward. And remember, we have a lot of things to do and the big mission to drive further adoption of our technology. That's, for me, is a big piece why diversity is here and why it's so important.
Thank you, Cindy. And you remind me of the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's part of what you're saying. We need to bring everyone together to be able to move in this incredibly young and innovative industry. Sarah, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I think, if we add another kind of common saying to that, we hear a lot more these days is all boats rise in a rising tide. And I think that's what really highlights the collaborative aspect of this industry. And it's also why I wanted to join a company like Nexa, working with partners like Henkel, because of that collaboration and that difference of thinking. As Cindy mentioned, it's such a young industry and there's just so much room to make a difference. And we are at that intersection, of traditional manufacturing and high tech. And I think we both know what the traditional or expected workforces in both manufacturing and tech look like. And the great thing about 3D printing is it's never what you think it looks like. And why shouldn't that extend to our workforce? It's all about thinking differently. And as Lisa just incredibly explained, there's supreme power in thinking differently, and that's the best way to get forward. So I think we need to really highlight who's doing what in this industry, how they're doing it, how we can come together to make new things, make better things, and innovate together.
Thank you, Sarah. And I hear a couple of elements here, a lot of collaboration and the intersection between old ways of doing things and new ways of doing things, bringing traditional manufacturing and additive manufacturing together, and then helping people adopt these new technologies and be open to doing things in a different way. So there's so many elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some of them work and some of them don't necessarily help us move forward. But I know that you've experienced some very successful approaches. And I'd like to hear from your perspective, Sarah, what are some of the key elements of a successful diversity, equity, and inclusion practice or approach? What has really worked for you? What have you seen?
The most important thing I've seen is intentionality, and really having kind of, when you're talking about an organizational level, having buy-in from, the top down and to impact the entire team, to have that complete support organization-wide, to really have the psychological safety to bring your whole self to work and to be a valued contributor whose voice is heard on a team. And there's really this aspect to it that it has to be on purpose. It has to be intentional. Creating a company culture is an intentional thing. It seems to evolve organically, but that can only, after a while you have to say, oh, these are what we really stand for. These are our values. These are our pillars. These are the foundations on which we lay our business. We add to our team on which our together and how we work with partners and ultimately with customers and ultimately, ideally, to impact the world.
Right. So I hear some three very important things: being very deliberate and intentional, having the support of all levels of an organization, but definitely at the very top, and having the psychological safety for somebody to bring their selves and their best selves, hopefully, to work. What would you add to that, Cindy?
Yeah, very good point, Sarah. I could not agree more. From my experience, another two elements that I really see driving success of diversity inclusion in our industry. The first one, believe it or not, walking the talk, right? How do we, us, really drive this topic by walking the talk? It doesn't have to be a big corporation initiative. It can be some small little things, but walk that talk. Together we can make that impact. So for me, that's a huge driver, ability to walk the talk. And the second part, very important, and this is experience that I see with my team as well. How do we build inclusive culture, inclusive climate where, like Sarah say, you bring yourself to work, you bring your best self to work, the environment that enabling that employee, that team member to be themselves and be the best of themselves. And that is the element I see driving success of Venus.
Thank you. Can you give me an example of somebody that you have seen, Cindy, walking the talk? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, example, basic. When we say we're going to be open-minded and listen to the team, right? What does that really mean? We need to really bring down to a tangible example. If we say we open-minded to listen to opinion around the team, we need to set up something simple, lesson and learn after the product launch. Ask a simple question: what went well? What can we have done better? And how do you feel? How do they feel? How the team feel with that launch? Simple thing, but we need to walk that talk and do it as a part of your management, of as a part of being a leader in the team, as a part of even be a peer to the teammate.
That makes perfect sense. When you say something simple, such as putting into your policies the listen and learn after a product launch, being able to have that guideline, I think starts creating that expectation from your team, right? That, hey, after we go and we develop something and we deploy it, we're going to have an opportunity to all of us provide the feedback. Sarah, you mentioned psychological safety, right? And in order to have this psychological safety, where if you have this policy of having a listen and learn, you can all speak up freely. What would you say? What recommendations would you give to create that environment of people being psychologically safe to express their true opinions?
I think that does go back a lot to being intentional about everything that you're doing. And in meetings, one of the most effective tactics I've seen is for the leader to be the last person to speak, to really take that back seat and listen to every member of the team, to offer feedback to every member of the team. And if someone's interrupted, which is an issue that many people in the workplace face and is especially common when women are at the table with primarily men, to make sure that, you just kind of draw attention to it quickly and say, I'm so sorry she wasn't finished with her point. Would you please continue? And give the space to complete a thought and to make sure that everyone on the team understands and internalizes the fact that they matter. They're part of the team for a reason. And that reason is ideally the valuable input and experience they bring. And having that support, even when it's just the simple allyship of listening and stopping people who interrupt, which, it's rarely a malicious thing. It's just an ingrained, kind of behavioral cue that people learn in life. And so we have to be intentional, be aware, be deliberate in stopping that and holding one another accountable. And so you have to kind of take that back seat, take that step, like Cindy said, really listen and learn for that feedback so that everyone has, the opportunity to feel comfortable speaking up. Because if you're interrupted enough times, you're going to stop raising your hand. Because if you can't finish your point, why would you start a new one?
Right. So, you're talking about being very intentional, and something that I've heard people implement as policies is to say the most senior person in the room speaks last. And that in itself creates that intentionality to say everybody around the table will be heard And then, like you mentioned, being an ally, being an ally is something that we might not always be very clear on what it means, but you gave a perfect example. You hear somebody else interrupt somebody else, and the norm, the culture is we do not interrupt each other. And being able to speak up and say, no, Sarah was saying something, let's allow her to continue and finish. So culture is such a big and scary topic, or it can be, right? Culture is, I think, something that gets created whether we acknowledge that we're creating culture or whether we don't. And culture ends up being the things that we do and think when people are not around to watch. Can you, Cindy, give me maybe a couple of examples of what that inclusive culture could feel like or could look like? What have you experienced in that perspective?
Yeah, that's also a very good element of driving this topic. It's actually start from a simple word called mindset. To me, that culture is come from getting away from fixing mindset to building mindset. We don't blame man, we don't fix woman, we building this culture forward. And I think this element around mindset shift is huge. And that's the first thing I really see to drive this inclusive, climate inclusive culture. Start with you, with your mindset. Stop blaming, stop fixing. Let's all of us building one step at a time forward. Another thing around the inclusive culture is also about co-create, right? Try to build or set up the environment that is enabling people in the team to come in with themselves, co-create together that environment where it's not come from just a corporation, but also from the bottom up, from the employee and from the team.
I love that co-creating. That's part of such a big part of being inclusive, right? We all contribute the best that we have to our communities, to our organizations. Sarah, do you have anything to add in terms of things that can help create and build that inclusive culture?
There are so many ways to go around it about that. And I mean, it does depend on the size of an organization and all of that. Creating safe spaces for people to talk without, fear of having to conceal any part of themselves, ways to share commonalities. Employee resource groups are a wonderful way to get together, have lunch and learn sessions, have kind of happy hours, nice gatherings within your own team, and have those kind of smaller feedback groups. Mentorship relationships can be super important to making new members of the team feel valued, feel included, and learn the ropes. So having those internal streams of communication and resources that people know how to access and feel like they're part of something is so important as you're building an intentional community and culture.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. I hear a couple of, I'm sorry, Cindy, did you want to add?
No, I'd like to add on that one because, taking some time on the site to get to know the team, get to know employee as a person. We all have story to share. We all have a struggling in life that we can lean in and lean on each other. So spending some time aside to get to know the team, to hear the story. What's the holiday story, right? I'm a mom. What is a kid story? Sometimes I have to set them out like now with daddy so that we can have a quiet time here. We all can share. We have a lot of things that we can connect it as a person. And that create a lot of safety space to bring themselves, to be able to speak up, feel more comfortable. So I want to add that to Sarah. I think it's brilliant, spending time aside on what we do daily, especially as a leader of the group.
So I hear there's a couple of things that we can do that are very formal, like creating ERG groups, employee resource group or business resource groups, where people can have an opportunity to connect with each other and also share their perspectives with the business and figuring out how to connect the diverse aspects of the group to the business objectives. But I also hear this beautiful element of mentoring and mentorship and allyship. That also goes along with what Cindy, you're saying, with getting to know somebody, getting to know their unique perspectives that can really help you see each other as the unique individuals that we are, that we all are, that we can bring and to our environments. I was thinking right now, and it's funny talking about allyship and letting people not be interrupted. And the term mansplaining came up. And what was really, really funny is my husband is an electrical engineer, and so he is listening to a leadership book. And the other day over dinner, he's like, "Let me tell you what mansplaining is." And I laughed a little because he was sort of trying to mansplain what mansplaining was. So we have a couple of questions that I want to start bringing into the conversation and get your feedback, Cindy and Sarah. One of the questions we have is, when it comes to implementing D&I initiatives in existing workplaces, how do you recommend getting those that might be set in their ways to listen and learn?
Sarah, you want to go first?
Sure. Obviously, that's a big question, and it differs based on the sense that someone is set in their ways, because a lot of people who seem set in their ways, often that will refer to people of a certain generation who might be best described as gooey nougat encased in hard candy coating. And so you just have to figure out how to get to that soft center, which really just means speak to them as a person. And there are so many people who don't understand what their colleagues experience, or that those experiences might be different, and that opportunities are different based on where you're born, what you look like, what your name is, where your education happened, how old you are. All of these things make very different experiences, and getting someone to understand that is a crucial first step, which just involves, connecting on a human level. And a lot of that, it can be informal, like, hey, let's grab lunch and talk. It can be formal, like, can we sit down with HR and discuss why this comment was inappropriate and I don't want to be called honey in the workplace. And it can include an outside DEI consultant coming in and doing workshops with the team. So there are a lot of different approaches to the listen and learn. Cindy, I would love to hear about what some of your experiences on that front have been.
Sure. I think for me, the most important thing is to leading ourselves by example. We all play such an important role to drive this or influencing the person that sit on the different end of the table. And for me, the best way to do it, even though it sounds simple, is all of us. We play a role. And by having us leading by example, do the small little things, but be able to walk that talk. That convincing for me, because in the end, it's not about fixing things. Again, go back to the mindset. It's about building. It's about journey to transform the culture, welcoming people to joy. See that value by seeing me, seeing you, Sarah, Venus. We are walking that talk together, and having Women in 3D Printing, the TIPE conference platform like this, that's already huge milestone. And sometimes I feel that we also need to find some time to congratulate and celebrate and acknowledge that a lot of progress making in the industry. We're not there yet, still way to go, but we're making a progress. And I'm very, very proud to be a part of this industry and this team.
Yes, I'm always blown away by the focus and the initiatives and the just innovative approach that 3D printing is taking to diversity and inclusion. I don't think I've seen that in many industries, definitely not industries that are this young. But I wanted to reflect on the answers to the question, how do you help somebody that is set in their ways listen? And Sarah, you said connect as a human, right? That's one of the most important things, because once you are actually able to connect person to person, you can really understand a lot more of the similarities that we have. And that might cause a person that could be coming off as being closed to doing things in a different way or seeing things in a different way to listen. And then, Cindy, you said something about leading by example and really walking the talk. Um, I have found that storytelling tends to be a very effective way to connect, and a lot of times storytelling through vulnerability, right? Because we are all in this journey, and when it comes to equity and inclusion, it is an ongoing progress that we're sometimes going to fall down and make mistakes and then stand up and figure things out. Have you had any experiences with that you'd like to share about any oops moments that you were able to then learn from when it comes to your personal journey?
Maybe I can start. For me, I'm a mom. Start from me. Look at me. I'm a mom. Being female professional, the struggling is real. Before I have my kids, I actually have two miscarriages before having the twin. It's such a heartbroken for me, and I cannot imagine. There's a lot of female out there have a similar story, share the same pain, and that's how do you really bring yourself and say, driving this topic, it's go beyond just a topic. It's human. Struggling is real. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay sometimes to feel disappointed, sad, mad, angry, joy, grateful. And this is acknowledgement of you being you. And I think by sharing your own story, good or bad, it makes such a huge connection to people out there, because I'm sure they share that story one way or another.
Thank you so much for sharing, Cindy. Yes, we have a saying in Mexico. In Spanish, it says "Ojos vemos, corazones no sabemos." But really, what that says, you can see somebody, but you really don't know what is going on inside until you have an opportunity to connect. And that vulnerability just really creates that special connection.
Um, it's a hard one because, Cindy, my heart goes out to you and everything that you've been through in your family. And I know that you've got your beautiful boys now, so that's wonderful. I think we all also start on that human relationship in, obviously very different ways, and start on this journey in different ways. And for me, I got deeply involved with women in 3D printing about 5 years ago after I experienced sexual harassment at an industry event. And I had been aware before that point that I was often the only woman at a table, if not in a room. And it was a strange position to be in because I was acutely aware of that, but there was a kind of guilt going along with that at the time. I was on the media side of the industry, so I wasn't even in the industry. So I wanted to help, push women forward, but I was like, I'm not on the technical side. I'm not on the inside. I'm not really a voice for women here, but I realized I could use that platform that I had to share my story, to meet with other women, connect with other women, and help share their stories. And when I did experience unpleasant situations in the industry, I used the privilege of a platform to talk about it. And we're taught as women a lot of times to brush that off, to keep walking after someone grabs you. And at the time, you know what I did? Looking back, I don't love that I just kept walking or that I just tried to remove a hand from me. And violence is never the answer, but I've never been sadder about not having slapped someone. In retrospect, I'm glad as a person I didn't slap another person, but it's difficult to know how to react in the moment. And so I spent a lot of time talking to other women, and there are so many stories. And it's not just women, it's happened to men too within the industry. But the more that we can talk about that and hold each other accountable for behavior, and if you see something, step in, be the ally someone needs. Don't white knight. That's not what someone needs. People don't always need a knight in shining armor. They need an ally and a friend and someone to be with in the moment. And so if you can be someone's safe space, be someone's safe space. And I recognize, in retrospect, it was a complete matter of privilege that I didn't get involved with women in 3D printing before that, as a middle-class white woman who's, decently educated and just kind of wandered into the industry and stepped immediately into leadership positions. I was so privileged to just have what looks like an easy journey. I've been through a lot in life, but my career progression wasn't especially difficult. And not everyone can say that. So the more that I got involved with women in 3D printing, the more I learned to listen to other people's stories and to use my privilege, my platform, to amplify those stories. The way I like to say it is just Will Smith, everyone. Just do that like he did to Jada. And just, have you met Venus? Have you met Cindy? Have you heard their stories? Let's listen. Let's be in this together. And I think that we need to be there for one another. I think I've gotten away from the question because when we get into personal topics, obviously there's a little more emotion attached, but I know, again, that this is a safe space to share this. And I think it is important that we talk about difficult things we've all been through and to recognize that that impacts our industry. So many times we come up with the question of why do we need to talk about diversity in 3D printing? We only need to talk about the technology. We don't. Women in 3D printing had a very powerful Stop Asian Hate panel last summer, where I felt so lucky to listen to my colleagues from the Asian community in this industry. Our colleagues are all being impacted right now. The Black community, the Asian community have both experienced incredibly difficult times in the last few years. And we need to realize those are the people we work with. Those are the people forming this industry. Those are the people creating the technology. If they're not at their best, how can we as an industry be at our best?
I think Venus, you're still speaking.
Venus, your sound cut out for me. I think you're back.
Of course, my microphone decides to stop working. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. What I was saying, Sarah, is it's a very difficult thing to share, and really I'm grateful that both you and Cindy have opened up your hearts and shown this vulnerability. And you've given us a perfect example of creating a psychologically safe space where you can truly connect to the experience and the identity of others. And that's one of the first steps in really being able to create an environment of inclusion. You're talking about, the Asian hate that our colleagues are experiencing. When you think about these 27 different dimensions of diversity that I mentioned that I could think about, we all have different things that are important for us, and we all have the beauty that comes with and the strength with that diversity and the challenges as well. I love analogies, and I like to remember that, diversity is being invited to the dance. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And equity is acknowledging that not everyone likes to dance and finding a different place to meet so everyone can be included in that community. I'd like to bring a couple more questions from the audience as we continue to talk about, D&I and why it's important and what it feels like and how we can promote this in the additive manufacturing industry. One of the questions from Rihanna is, how can we make diversity and inclusion more of a central issue, given the evidence that a diverse culture leads to improved workplace performance?
I can start. I think for me right now, especially with the industry that we live in, we know it's so critical, and the proof point is there, right? I don't know, the audience that asked the question, the proof point is there. So the topic is there. I think it's a matter of us really take it. And they're saying that additive manufacturing is a technology layer by layer. Same thing, bring diversity, inclusion, equity, layer to the business. And I think this is us that have to drive that. Of course, we have to have executive leadership outline, management that buy in, but it's on our hand. Bring in that layer, just like our technology, embedded into the business.
I love that. Layer by layer. That's how we build. That's why how we build in additive manufacturing, right?
Exactly.
Sarah, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I think it is always helpful to be able to bring those studies that do show the double-digit revenue improvements for companies with more diverse workforces and with actionable policies in place for their team that focus on DEI. That does help to get the buy-in from the corporate side of things. And then once that's in place, that's when the magic happens, when you can really start implementing the programs you're investing in. And it does take somebody to be the proof point, to be the driver within an organization. So make noise, make it known that's something that matters. Talking to recruiters, we see that that's something candidates are looking at. So being sure that hiring managers understand that that's something that is impacting the candidates who apply for a job. And, presenting the business case helps.
Mm-hmm.
And then the actual human side of the work can begin. So it is helpful that there are, in fact, studies available that show that investment on DEI has a solid ROI for the team, when the argument of let's be better itself isn't enough.
Right. I think that the business case can sometimes be a double-edged sword, but it's definitely foundational, right? Because everyone comes at this work from a different perspective, and those that need the numbers, we can, thank goodness, prove through so many studies that are out there what the business case shows as to why it's important. And the other thing that I would just add there is always connect the DE&I to your business objectives. That makes it so much easier to get support at every level of the company. We have another very interesting question that I actually love. It says, as a DE&I advocate, do you feel pressured to be perfect? And how do you handle situations where you made a mistake? How do you make sure that you are able to be continuously learning? And I'm just going to add a little thing here to say, I have made myself so many mistakes, and those moments have been the basis of incredible growth and learning and humility for me. But I'm going to ask our panelists, Sarah, what do you think? How do you handle when you've made a mistake?
I have been creating with an incredible team DEI programming for the first time at Women in 3D Printing. And right now, as we're seeing here and on a lot of teams in this industry I've spoken to over the last year, right now, a lot of the qualification for leading DEI work is wanting to. And so that makes it difficult because the drive needs to be there, yes, but there aren't that many people who have expertise and experience in what that actionably means. So I know that I absolutely, made some mistakes, thought some things might be more important that they were, didn't highlight things enough, and have been learning on the go. And it's public within the DEI team as we kind of get our feet under us and try to figure it out. And there's pressure because you're seen as a leader, people look to you to see how to do it. And if you're not doing it right, they say, well, what's the point? And so I think having an openness and honesty that DEI is a journey. There is no end goal. There's no Emerald City at the end of the yellow brick road. It's just a long road that goes forever, but the journey matters and it gets better along the way. And so why not plant flowers and help them to grow? And, along the way, invest in your own learning. I found a certificate course from Cornell and earned a certificate in diversity and inclusion for HR. That course was incredibly educational for me, and I absolutely recommend something of that sort to anyone who's serious about their own learning, as well as partnering with a DEI expert at Women in 3D Printing. We're lucky to partner with Venus and her colleague Alejandra for their expertise as we work with companies to help create those. So learning who to align yourself with, who to learn from, and owning up to any mistakes made along the way and being clear that it's a journey, I think, is how to go about it and keep learning.
I love that, Sarah. The journey in itself is the success. And for me, one of the biggest phrases that encompasses this is that intention and impact are not always hand in hand. And being aware that you might have the best intentions, but the impact might have been different, and then trying to correct that, I think it's a good mindset to approach your mistakes. Cindy, what about you?
I love this question. I welcome you to come to my house. I teach my kids every day. Imperfect, not perfect, make things so beautiful. So embrace not to be perfect. And the failure, it's just one way of finding the way how things doesn't work. So for me, failure, mistake is about celebration actually, right? And have that mindset. The faster you fail, you get up, you pivot, the sooner you can be successful. And I think this is a huge shifting when you look at mistake. We are making mistake, but we learn from it, we grow from it, we pivot it. And that's how the success come in. So I think that's a very, I would say, interesting aspect and perspective, how you take on the topic.
Yeah.
And Cindy, I would say what you just said fits in so perfectly with why this matters in 3D printing, where prototyping is so big and the whole point is to fail faster. Fail faster, fail better, fail forward. And that's for the industry as well as for what we're talking about here.
Don't let perfect get in the way of good.
In theater, I was a theater major in college, and one of our professors, his tagline was, "Done is good." We had a lot of perfectionists working on the technical side, and eventually he would have to stop us and say, "Done is good." It's one of those the show must go on kinds of things, but the set won't be perfect, but it needs to go up. So done is good, doing is good.
Yes, doing, the active process. Well, I think we have about 1 minute left. Do we have any more questions, or is there anything that you would like to add, either Cindy or Sarah?
I would like to say that Women in 3D Printing DEI will have a lot happening in 2022. So be sure to look out for what we're doing. We'll be working with some and utilizing Venus's expertise. At Nexa 3D, we'll be working with like-minded partners like Cindy and the team at Henkel. And who you work with is so important to how you continue on the journey. So also, reach out. Women in 3D Printing loves partnerships. Nexa 3D loves partnerships. And I love a conversation. So let's all get in touch. I'll be on the networking floor soon. I hope to see you all there too as well. Cindy, final words?
Yeah. For me, doing nothing is not enough. It's in our hand. We welcoming all of you out there. Come join us in the journey. Small step, big step. Come join us, and then we can drive that culture transformation together.
Well, thank you both, and thank you to TIPE and Women in 3D Printing. You're doing amazing work, and I feel so blessed to be part of this journey. And
Thank you.
you have some more networking sessions. Looking forward to continuing to learn from all of you.
Same here. Thank you. Bye-bye for now.